and welcome to today's webinar, Strategies to Increase Member Engagement. My name is Isa Hackick. I'm from Redback Conferencing and will be your facilitator for today's session. I would now like to welcome our presenters for today, Dan Keller, a Member Evolution Sales Manager, and Bruce Rasmussen, a Management Consultant. How are you today, both?
We're great, thank you. We're really good, Isa. Good to be here.
That's good.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm Dan Keller, and I'm really excited to be having this presentation with all of you out there, and very excited to have Bruce with me today, and particularly because Bruce has been an expert in helping organisations deliver content for the last 10 years or so, and we're very fortunate to have him today to share his experience with us. So the topics that we're going to cover obviously is content, and the heading "Content is King" is not to be undermined. We're going to talk about segmentation and the role the role segmentation will play in how you capture and deliver information, to really move then to delivery of content via personalised delivery. So really knowing the individual needs and wants of each individual member. We're going to look at what I think is a relatively new area, which has been around for the last 2 or 3 years, which is called gamification, which is really a reward systems, and we'll give you some ideas as to how you could use that today to engage and keep your members engaged. And we'll finish off just a bit of a summary on dynamic data and the importance that data plays in your content delivery. So first of all, just having a quick look at what is engagement, and I've found this slide from a Dr. Bob Wright, who is a leader in human development thinking, and today we're going to look at how we can actually take someone who is, as is listed here, disengaged. This may be someone who's just come onto your website. They may have downloaded a bit of content, a bulletin. How then basically to get them to actually attend an event, to move on to actually becoming a member, and ultimately to having that transformative engagement, as it's called in here, where they might be on committees. They might want to join your board. They might be writing regular comments, and how we can basically use the website as a tool to get to that level. So let's move on to content, and Bruce, this is your thing.
Terrific. Well, good morning, everybody. It's Bruce Rasmussen here. Thanks, Dan, and thanks, Elisa, for the introduction. Content. A lot of people study what members require. A lot of people study what buyers require when they consume goods and services. And the game has changed significantly, even over the last few years. And what we have to bear in mind is that largely the number one thing that customers or members or buyers want is they want to be educated. And without knowing all of the organisations, all of the associations that are on the call today, educating your members, teaching them things that they didn't know, adding value in that regard has to be absolutely critical. So you've probably heard people talk about content is king, things like that. What you've got to realise is that marketing itself is nothing but content. All marketing is content. It's content in different forms. It could be in a webinar form. It could be in a TV show or a TV ad, but marketing is content. So just like I'd be very surprised if many of you don't have marketing strategies, it's really important to wade through all the different types of content that you actually have a content strategy. And what we look for in organisations is actually that a strategy exists, there are objectives to be achieved, and there are actions that are associated with that particular strategy. So we thought this might not be a bad point in time to pause. We're going to put a poll up on the screen. We're just looking for some input from you. Do you have a formally documented content strategy? Is there a content strategy in place for your association? We'll just pause. The poll will come up on the screen, and we'll see how many folk are actually have their strategy in place. So the results are coming through? Appreciate everyone giving the answers. We're nearly there. We can probably stop at that point. What we're seeing is that roughly 70% of participants on the call don't have a formal content strategy. And obviously roughly 30% of you do. So I would really urge, even if you want to contact us after the session, to have a strategy around your content is necessary to really add value to your members. Dan is going to be talking later on about how you can tailor the content, how you can personalise, but you really need to have that strategy in place. So a couple of comments are coming through. Marianne, it's good to see that you're in the process of forming a content strategy. Nikki is saying, would you also say the reverse, that marketing is content? I think you can say them, Nikki, either way around. Okay, it's about getting the right sort of message out to people. You could argue there are parts of marketing, like the delivery of the content. So there's the mechanics around that. But in terms of the messaging, marketing and content are the one thing. Joanne, pleased to see that you're undergoing a structural review, which no doubt will change some of the content that you have to make available to your members. So when we say a content strategy, okay, a strategy really is all about, let's set some objectives. Okay, it's tempting to say, right, we need a brochure on this, we need a white paper for this on our members, we need to send them an email on the following. You've got to start your content overall plan by saying, well, what are the objectives that we want to achieve? Okay, now those objectives, got some sample ones coming up on the next slide, but perhaps it's an objective to increase members, or as Dan will be showing you later on, with how can you measure the engagement that different people are having with your website. Content is one of your key weapons to actually do that. So overall, you need to set some objectives. For each objective you have, you need to say, these are the strategies that we're going to employ to achieve the objective. And even though it's a well-used word, what do we mean by a strategy? A strategy is simply a pattern of actions. Okay, so you need patterns of actions, which are strategies to achieve your content objectives. Now, here's some potential objectives that could well see the light of day in content strategy documents within your association. So perhaps one of your content objectives is you want to bring your association to the attention of non-members. So you would then need to think about, well, what are some strategies, what are some patterns of action I can do with content to achieve that objective? The obvious one that comes to mind there, and we're going to look shortly at how prospective members make their buying decision, what the journey is that they go along before they decide to sign up to the association. But one of the things that almost every potential buyer does is they search online. Right? So they might not realise that they need to join your association, but they might have a problem in their organisation. They might have a business issue that they want addressed. So what buyers will always do is they will search around the problem on the search engines. So critical question for your websites, do you have the keywords on your websites that will attract these searchers when they go to the search engines? And far too often we see from a content perspective that websites are what we would call late buyer journey websites. They have information about the association, they might have information about the members, there might even be information about what the different membership packages are. But unless you're putting on the website the keywords that people use to search around their problem, you're not going to attract them to you. And so this is where it's so critical, delineating out the objectives you have for your content. Another objective might be you want to increase the perceived value of an individual member's membership. Okay, so what does that mean from a content perspective? Well, maybe you've got to have content available that will assist them to solve a problem. Maybe there's other content that will introduce them to other entities. So maybe that's helping their business to attract other customers or other partners outside the realm of the association. Tremendous value for the association to do that. And the big one for us, all of the research says, doesn't matter if it's members, buyers, whatever, people want their thinking challenged. If I moved away, I guess, from this conversation to a more of a sales and a signing members up conversation, the number one thing that prospective members want is they want their thinking challenged. And indeed, when they become a member of your association, the number one thing you can do for them is to challenge their thinking. If you can have some content available that shows them that there's a better way for them to run their business, and Dan will talk later on about segmentation and personalisation, you can really narrow down and be very specific about the content you make available to solve different challenges. And you don't spread it out there. The whole personalisation process is about making the right problem solution available to the right member at the right time. You might have content that nurtures a member because you want them to make a purchase. Now that might be renewing their membership, or you might have goods and services available that you want them to purchase. Well, you need to take the buyer on the journey to get them to understand, yes, there's something missing in my life. That's why I need to look at this particular purchase. They'll still go and search around the problem, so you need to make sure you've got content available there. And they might even talk to other peers and experts before they ultimately make the purchase. So there's different content you've got to have available there. Here's some case studies. Here's some testimonials from other members about how they've found our problem-solving content to be particularly useful. See some other objectives there. You might want to increase renewal rates. And again, Dan's talking about segmentation. Your membership might be rising at a great rate, but unless you break it down into the component parts, you might miss the fact that perhaps one segment's growing astronomically, but the other segment's actually fallen behind. Right, so content can help you address these segments, and Dan's going to take us through the theory behind segmentation later on. So I've used a couple of times the word value. And we all use the word value, and I'm sure that you want and you are providing value to your members, but the difficulty we always find is nobody knows how to define value. That's a very handy definition to have. Bit of a formula, but the definition that we like to use is that value equals the benefit provided minus the sacrifice that has to be made. What does that mean in terms of content? Let's say that we have some content that we want to put up on our website that will help some of the members solve a specific problem. So obviously the benefit they get is they might be introduced to thinking where they didn't realise they had a problem. Maybe you can help them solve a problem where they don't have to spend so much money to do it. But you also have to reduce the sacrifice they make to get at that content. Right? Value is benefit minus sacrifice. If it's too hard to find the content, or if you're sending the same piece of content out to everybody without segmenting and personalising, if you're not incenting them through the gamification that Dan's going to take us through later on, you could actually be making it too hard for your members to consume that content. And so actually targeting and individualising the content, some of the parameters around how you do that, Dan will be covering later on. But if you get the right piece of content to the right person at the right time, help them solve a problem, change how they're thinking, show them a product or service that might be very useful for them, then you're creating tremendous value. The harder it is, however, for them to get at your content, the value that they might get out of it is going to decrease substantially. I talked before about a member journey. This is largely the journey that most people go on when they want to buy something. Now, by buying something, this might be buying a membership to your association. It might be renewing a membership. It might be purchasing some goods or some services that your organisation offers. Right? But buyers don't wake up in the morning, members don't wake up in the morning thinking, I must sign up to this association today. Right? They're calm in respect to that. You have to get something to happen to shatter their status quo. You want them to stop thinking, I really don't need to be a member of this organisation, and you want them to start thinking, I do need to be a member. Right? Now, it's content that will let you to do that. If your non-members can arrive on your website, Dan will talk about that process later on. If they can see the value, if they can point out that you've actually got a problem in your business and there might be a better way to run it, then that's going to put in their head, I need to think about this, I need to search around it. So they go on the journey. They search around the problem by going to search engines. And again, if your website is not set up with early buyer engagement keywords, you're not going to be able to attract people to your website. Can I also say that those of you that are working within the association, your LinkedIn profiles are just as Google searchable as the website. So you've got to think about what content do I want to attract buyers early in their journey, and how do we use content to walk with them on that journey. So what's the anatomy of content? There's really 4 decisions that you've got to make. The first one is you've got to locate that member. You know, what's the context that they're in? Where are they on their members' journey? Who are they? And so, again, we've got to realise the number one reason that customers or members defect from organisations, right, a huge contributor to it is indifference shown on the part of the selling organisation or of the association. Okay, so you have to have your content, you have to tailor it. Dan's going to talk about, what are the different parameters that we can use for segmentation and for personalisation. But the last thing you want is your member or your prospective member to be treated just as the same as anybody else. Right, they'll ricochet off your website, they won't want to join. So you've thought about the content, you understand who they are, then you've got to say, well, what action do we want them to take once they've read the content? And again, Dan's got some examples on websites for us later on where you can see that as the member signs up and starts to give some of their information, the call to action or the action that we want them to take changes. Okay, so if we're going to send content to someone, what do we want the result to be? The third one is how we're going to get the content out to people. And certainly, housing it in different places on the website is obviously one distribution method. You might have the integrated emailing software extension so that you can get the right content to the right person at the right time. So you've got to figure all of that out. Then it's really thinking out, well, what is the content itself? What's the topic? What's the format? How can we move that forward? And again, what you can find, just before I hand back over to Dan, is that depending on where the member is on their journey, there are different formats of content that work better. Right, so if we go right back to that poll we did at the beginning, we need that content strategy. That content strategy has to say, what are the objectives? How are we going to develop and get content out to members and prospective members and maybe other partners? But the content has to change depending on where the member is on their journey. Right, so Dan will talk about personalisation, but if we know where they are on that journey in respect of possibly signing up or consuming your purchases, or even if it's the reverse, they're actually calm about the fact they've decided not to renew their membership, again, we need to have special content at special parts. If I could highlight, though, just in closing, what we think probably the most important piece of content is, it's the content that gives these disruptive insights. And I would suggest that there's lots and lots of benefits that come out of being a member of your association. But if you can teach your members something that they didn't know, even if that initially disrupts their thinking, they're going to be eternally grateful. Okay? That's great benefit, which is leading to value. And if you make that easy for them to consume and easy to access, you're reducing the sacrifice they have to make to consume that. And that's just adding even more value moving forward. So I guess that's just a brief overview, Dan, of different types of content and how that aligns into the member's journey. So I'm going to hand back to Dan now to talk about optimising that content and successfully delivering it.
Thanks, Bruce. So your web visitor is on your website. They're there because they might have searched you via Google, they might know of you already, and they're interested in what you have to deliver, and you've got some good content on there. The thing now that really we need to get to the next stage is we need to understand who that web visitor is. Now, we want to understand what their interests are, maybe what demographics they belong to, and where are they in that relationship cycle with you. So basically, we're taking them on a journey. And try and accumulate more information about them, and we want to ultimately find out, and this might be a new term for people, what their digital body language is. And I'll explain a bit later on when I talk about personalisation as to what digital body language is all about. But the first step is the sign-up process. Now, it's not necessarily a sign-up to become a member straight away, but we want to encourage them to get a login, because once they've got a login, there is a connection with you as an association, and we can start finding out more about them, information about them, learning about them. Now, I might add that there are some systems out there, and some of the better, more expensive systems, that will already track you once you're on a website. And when you log in, they'll be able to see that, hey, it was Joe was there last week, last month, and they looked at these pages and can already start providing information specific to your interests. So the way that we encourage our customers to basically collect the information and to get people to get a login is to use what we call calls to action. So it might be subscribing to a piece of information to a newsletter. It might be asking questions of the associations. It might be registering for an event as a non-member, but ultimately we always encourage the designer of the website to have lots and lots of calls to action to actually become a member and incentives to be a member. So this example here, the visitor has basically registered, they've looked at some events, and we know that they've got their address. We know that in this case they're in Victoria. So we basically are suggesting events, suggesting news that may be of specific interest to them.
And maybe, Dan, I'm just relating back to that slide we put up on value. Value is benefit minus sacrifice. So the more targeted the information is, as Dan said, let's show them events that are only relevant to them. You're reducing the sacrifice they have to make to get across that knowledge, and therefore you're building up the value.
And when we're collecting that information and when they're expressing interest, in this case basically want to register an event, and it's a pretty obvious one, but you want to basically show that there's more value in them registering as a member than as a non-member. A typical one is to offer discounts, in this case to an event or to a conference. And once they've actually joined, and to facilitate engagement with practical tools. So I've listed here continual professional development, and as a matter of interest, education is the second most common reason people join an association, to improve their career prospects through education. And some of the better systems today allow members to be able to track their education path, to allocate CPD points for events they attend, maybe events that are run by the association, maybe run outside of the association, to create their own CPD diary and to track where they're at. Okay, let's move on to segmentation. I think segmentation, most of you would know what segmentation is about. There's been a lot of topics about that over the last 5 to 10 years. But really, it's a practical way of collecting data that addresses specific needs. So I've got a little poll here happening, and I'm not surprised to see that most people are using interest groups or special interest groups. Well, we've got catching up with people who don't. Let that run for a minute. Okay, so we're seeing 2/3 of people out there are using interest groups, and they're using this to deliver content information to their members. Thank you for participating in that. So as I mentioned, the interest groups are basically a practical way of grouping members who have common interests in desire, which then basically will allow us to group content that is specific to that group. We can create communications, obviously events, products and services. And I think Bruce mentioned it before when we were talking about content, that you might find that some groups are very active and are benefiting from a lot of information. Other groups are not. There's a question here, someone just pointed out to me, what is the main reason? The main reason is information at the end of the day, or content. And these are not my stats, these are stats that were collected by a survey called Association Matters, and content was 51% and education was 42%. So here we go. And as we basically, with the special interest groups, we're collecting information, we're looking at what events people are joining, we're collecting data on each, not just the group, but on each individual going forward. So commonly used basis, I mean the obvious, the geographic, where do people reside. Demographic, what age group do they belong to? Baby boomers, X-Gen, Y-Gen. Because again, their behaviour, which is the next common thing, is often changes by what demographic they belong to. How much they actually utilise the web. Do they utilise their mobile phones to view emails? Actually, as a matter of interest, I found out yesterday that 51% of all emails in the world are actually open today on a smartphone, which is a huge increase, obviously, to what it was in the last 3 years. And psychographic information, which is basically looking at their lifestyle, Social class and personalities, obviously that will have more importance for some associations rather than others. Another question here that's come through, are special interest groups your own website or such as LinkedIn groups? Well, typically they will be on your websites, and you need to basically create your interest groups based on, I guess, the information, the content, the reason that you exist as an association. It can work similar as LinkedIn groups, certainly, and you'll see as we go forward, particularly talking about gamification and personalisation, a special interest group can work in the same fashion as a LinkedIn group actually works.
Just one strategy we have seen work well, if you did have a LinkedIn group or somebody else has a LinkedIn group, it's probably going to have more pulling power than your website if people don't know about your website. So the opportunity though is to engage with that person on the LinkedIn group and say, look, just thought I'd reach out and make contact. We have some special resources available on our association website. Can I send you the URL to that? Okay, so you'll have a bigger reach in a LinkedIn group, but people always say don't build your house on rented land. Okay, and you'll never know when LinkedIn will change their policy or change groups or do stuff like that. So certainly we encourage people to gather prospects or members, etc., on those broader platforms because they've got much bigger reach. But your goal has to be, how do I get them onto my website? But there's no question that LinkedIn is a good hunting ground, in inverted commas, for people that have problems that your organisation can solve.
And moving on with segmentation, we looked at, I guess, the more general areas of collecting data. Now, again, every association has specific areas, and in great part the reason that they exist. So, example of that is, what stage of their career path does the member belong to? Are they at the beginning? Are they a student, or at the end retired? Again, the information will be different depending on where they sit. If you're working in an area such as health or any sector where accreditation is important, the information that you would provide to someone who's a trainee as opposed to someone who's an accredited professional will again be different. Their paths of development are different. If they're a service provider, say in the building industry or the service industry, well, what sort of services do builders commonly provide? Do plumbers commonly provide? Capture that information and provide services that will assist them in growing their business. Or taking it a step further, what sort of special services might that industry provide? Mobile services obviously are becoming more and more popular in delivering services to someone's door. So the outcomes really is to try and provide the solution before they even ask for it. So delivering that information relevant to their needs, pushing that information out before they ask for it has got to be the goal to get. Create newsletters that have meaning, that are targeted to specific audiences. Getting the ability to create a member directory. So again, I use the building industry as an example, is to basically have a member listing on the website so the general public can go and choose a particular building contractor who has expertise, say in roofing, who is in a particular area. All that information can come out of the special interest group. And the ability to do real-time reporting by, again, gauging the interaction and the feedback from particular groups. You will find that some groups are more active than other groups, and obviously you can push more in those particular areas. And as Belinda has said many a time, make your decisions to be based on data and don't just guess as to what it might be. Pretty obvious, I think. Let's move on to personalisation. I've got a poll there. We might start off with a poll. So how many people can actually personalise their website content down to the individual member? Oh, that's really great. So again, about 2/3 can't and 1/3 can, which is pretty much the opposite that we had for the special interest groups from memory. I mean, in many cases, it will depend on, pretty much all cases, the software that you're currently utilising. I mean, you need to basically have the CRM controlling your website, and it's really, again, the importance of having a one-platform system where the web is an integral part of your overall system to be able to control that. And just as a side issue right now, if for people out there who are looking at reviewing their software, looking at their websites, looking at their CRM, please consider it as one whole system. Don't separate your web from your CRM, from your database. Because if you do, you'll have great difficulty in achieving correct delivery of personalisation.
Just I could probably reinforce there, just to remind everyone again, the expectation there now, we saw roughly a third of you are able to personalise your content. So 2/3 of you, you've got to understand that the expectation now is personalised content. And that's been set for years by the Amazons of the world who can actually deliver emails. They understand everything about you. The number one reason why people will defect, why members will defect from your organisation is indifference. Right? It's nearly 60% of the contribution to why people leave. If you treat someone as a number, even though you think you're communicating with them, you're not. So as Dan's saying, be able to collect the information that's stored in the CRM and the content in the newsletter or the content they see on the website actually changes based on their background, etc. That's just critical. If you're not able to do that, effectively you're treating someone as a number.
So I had a couple of questions there. One of them was, can I give an example? I guess, Edward, you're asking about an example of personalised delivery of content. I'll be showing a couple of websites later on, which hopefully will give you a bit of a taste as to what it would be. I'm going to move quickly to the next slide and talk about the digital body language. So to understand digital body language, you've got to understand the difference between dynamic content and static content. So dynamic content is that is customized to the visitor based on their interests, on what they want to receive, as opposed to static content, which is basically independent of anybody's needs. Everybody sees the same thing. It's really where websites have come from, and dynamic content is where websites are going to. So the digital body language is data used to create a visitor profile that's recorded their individual information, their geographic, their demographic, and their psychographic information. And the goal is to get what we call a data score. So the data score basically highlights their most likely location, the service and industry interests, and that score is then used to personalize content that is delivered to the visitor. So we're talking about the website. I've got 3 examples here, and I'm not sure how clearly that comes out on your screens. I can actually, I don't know if you see the mouse there, but if you look at this area here, the first one here is basically a website view. Green. In the green area is a website view of someone who's just a general visitor. They're not logged in, and their call to action is basically to get a login. Give them an incentive to actually log in to get some information. Same website, someone who's logged in but not yet a member. And guess what? The call to action there is to basically join. Incentives to join. Same web page, next visitor, someone who is a member. The call to action is for them to do some activity. In this particular case, again in the green area, is to register for a conference or for an event. Same website, same web page, 3 different logins. Now, these are pretty basic and straightforward views. You could have more information there, but just there to give you an idea as to what exists. And I've got some more questions here. What kind of software management system exists to coordinate this information for small organisations? There are a number of software out there that will do that for not much money. I don't want to actually promote too many software organisations here and now. So maybe Catherine, if you want to give me a call later on, I can take you through some ideas as to who you should be talking to. Content delivery. Okay, so now basically the web visitor, the member, has joined a special interest groups, and we're giving them options as to what do they want to receive. So we call this communications preferences. And it's not only what content, but it's also how they want it delivered. And again, some sites will actually ask you, do you want to receive a particular type of content via email? Do you want to receive it by snail mail? Do you want to look at it on the website through a login? But it is important to give members the choice as to what information they want to receive, to subscribe, and also to unsubscribe to the content that we offer. Okay. We are constrained by time, and I want to give some more chance for questions to come in, but I want to move now to the reward systems, to gamification. And the poll there is, who has actually heard about gamification and who's actually using it? Interesting. So just over 60% of people, I guess, have heard of gamification and can see that it has value for the association as a reward system. Thank you for that. So what is gamification? Well, it's the integration of game mechanics, or gaming, into a website to basically drive engagement, get people to spend more time on their website. And I think it's particularly important for I'll call it the younger generations, the X and particularly the Y gens. And I know there's a lot of conversations out there how to encourage Y generations to join associations and to be active in associations. Well, hey, gamification is probably an interesting way to start that conversation. So examples, I guess examples for them reward systems as well. The most, I guess, common out there is frequent flyer points cards, where you acquire points based on activity and purchases that you do. The more flying you do, the more points you do, the more purchases you make via, the Qantas or the Virgin reward system, the more points you're going to get. And moving on, I guess, to the newer ones, I should have had a poll here to find out how many people actually heard of the Nike Fuel Band and the Samsung Nation, but Nike Fuel Band is basically a gamification and reward system where people can track their progress, their athletic progress, let's call it that way, and be able to measure themselves against their friends or groups of other people. And actually, Nike will publish a leaderboard, a scoreboard, and how people are comparing. The Samsung Nation example, I'll just move to that one. So Samsung have a service called Samsung Nation, where you can track your movements on the Samsung websites, what activity you do on there, what purchases you make, and be rewarded with badges and points. They keep a track on their website of that. They allow people to basically, blog and to leave comments about it, with the ultimate view of having enough points to basically get discounts on Samsung products, to enter, have advantages in competitions or unique competitions. Again, they're creating activity via a new form of reward system. Okay, so gamification equals loyalty, as we got on here. So I guess the key stat here is that organizations who use gamification as part of their website strategy are seeing people spending more than double the amount of time on the websites. They're seeing that revenue has increased substantially when they have that, and they basically see that the engagement, the interaction they have with the organization has gone up 86%, which is really quite amazing. So let's have a look as to how we could actually use that with an association. So how could you use gamifications, and how can you reward it? where you can look at things like award points, badges for the amount of content that is read, obviously the amount of money that is spent, events attended, content that might be submitted, presenting on a committee, even opening up newsletters, collaborating to community questions, commenting on articles. And other things you can look at is basically having scores. Score the interactions, give them points, publish those points. People like to see, how they stand against other members. Put it over a period of time, let's say for a 12-month or a 6-month period, reward people at the end of that period, and put them, start them afresh for the next period, or give them a slight advantage over the others. Maybe create a lifetime leaderboard on this.
I think, Dan, important to note too that this goes right back to the content strategy and the objectives. So your gamification strategy is going to fit in with whatever those objectives are. It's just motivating them, giving them even more reason to consume the content or to take the actions that you want them to take. So it always comes back to having a strategy, having some objectives, having a plan.
And the other thing also to consider is to look at the people who are not getting points, who are not being active. It's another way of identifying people who are active, people who are inactive. If they're inactive, then give them incentives to be active. So ideas here as to what is currently being used. We talk about badges, so badges for effort. As it goes a little bit back to the Boy Scouts, but badges, levels of achievement, leaderboards that we spoke about, progress bars, progress bars maybe for the education seminars, education courses that they attend and the goals they're trying to achieve. A virtual currency, which I think is an interesting idea, again based on their engagement. Reward them with points of currency they can use for other things. Trading, gifting, that's again comes back to a little bit to the way that the frequent flyer points work. Even challenges between users, challenging between groups of users is a way of looking at it. There's been a lot of messages or questions that have come through. There's so many that I guess we'll have some time at the end and we'll try and respond to as many as we can. So really, we're now getting to the summary and dynamic data. So the stats currently, and these are stats that came out last year, 52% of members rate their association communication as good, only 13% as excellent, and 35% of it think of it as being poor. So again, it's really all about using that dynamic data, creating dynamic lists, having the right segmentations, and personalising the information that you're delivering. And the outcome is to increase your member engagement, and that's going to be rewarded by higher retention. And it's interesting to note, and again, this came from a stat that a simple 5% in member retention could equate to a 50% increase in revenue. It's quite a substantial stats, and something I guess the CRM industry has been evangelizing for quite some time. Okay, all the questions are coming through. Let's go to the questions. We've got about 10 minutes left. So
there was a question there about, does gamification only apply to commercial outcomes like purchasing, etc.? And I think it can be a lot broader than that. So, for example, you might want different of your members to contribute content, okay, or you might want them to bring other people on board. So, again, it comes back to your objectives, but it's not necessarily around how much they buy and those sorts of areas. I think it's much broader.
What sort of resourcing is needed to manage gamification? Well, again, it does come back to having that integrated, web CRM platform, and creating the special interest groups and as much personalisation as you can, and then basically, allocating rewards to the members who basically participate in that. Resourcing, basically as creating those, either the badging or the leaderboards as part of your website, and linking it back to those groups. I think it really depends on an individual basis as to how you want to do it, as to what sort of resources. But simple gamification, allocation of badges, would be a little bit like allocating certificates for achievement, just in a different format. So simple gamification, not that much. Complex gamification, quite a bit more.
I think what you'll find, the hard part is actually figuring out what you want to achieve and how you're going to set it up. And if you've got the right software system, then once you've told the software system, here's how we want to reward people, it literally is set. So, well, it's not quite set and forget, because you want to then follow up on how different people are advancing, right? So, but you can map all the workflows out. Again, it's the part that unfortunately gets missed over sometimes. What are we trying to achieve? How can we use content to do that? How can we use gamification to further incent, to move towards our objectives? Once it's set up, and I'm not a software guy, but once it's set up, as best I know, the system takes over and runs the process for you.
We had a question there about gamification tends to be closely tied to commercial content. Well, obviously, in the commercial organisations, yes, the Nikes and the Samsungs. In an association context, really not just about purchasing, as we know well. It's really about participation and engagement. So to reward people who can contribute content, is not really a commercial goal in itself. It's about participation and engagement. There's a lot more questions here, a lot to do with gamifications and how to manage gamifications and what effort, what sort of software. Well, again, due to the time constraints and not doing a total software pitch on you, it would be great if you could either contact myself or Bruce after the seminar, and we can talk to you more about that.
Certainly what I've learned is the more that you can get one system to do, the better. It cuts down the manual intervention. So you really need to be choosing platforms that can offer all of these areas. So does it have its own CRM? Can it go out and send messages to your members? Is the gamification built in? To me, that's the key, because as soon as you're using different platforms to do different things, then you've got to have human resources there that marry up the systems and do stuff. So again, I'm not in the software game, but finding a web-based platform that does all of these things is going to improve the outcomes for members, but it's also going to reduce the headaches internally.
There's probably been about 15 questions on gamification, and a lot to do with how to manage it in software. I think there's really enough interest in there to probably run a seminar purely on gamification and gamification strategies and giving examples on software. So it's certainly something that we will seriously consider in doing in the short term, either directly ourselves or through AusA. So we will keep you posted on that. For all those who want to get in touch with us, the best way, I guess, is via email. My email address is dank@memberevolution.com. And Bruce?
Mine's harder to remember, but it's Bruce Rasmussen, just one word. So BruceRasmussen. Then it's at Carpe, CARPE, -DIEM for Mary.com.au. But I understand we'll be in contact with everybody, and all of our contact details will be emailed out.
Well, thank you so much for listening to us today. I hope it's given you some ideas and some value, and basically how you could utilise your website in a more proactive area. And just lastly, there's a survey there to basically ask you to comment on today's presentation and our roles as presenters. So we look forward to your responses, and thank you very, very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dan and Bruce, and thanks all for joining today's webinar. We do hope that you found the content inspiring and the technology easy to use. If you would like any additional information on the presentation today or on how to host your own webinars, please contact us directly. Have a great day, and we'll see you all next time.